Hello and welcome to the Capital Projects podcast, where we discuss the main challenges and opportunities of capital projects around the world. Today's episode is very, very special as we celebrate a major milestone. This is episode number 200 of our show.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Ed. And to mark the occasion, I'm honored to welcome an internationally renowned guest, Edward Merrow, founder and executive chairman of IPA, the Independent Project Analysis, one of the world's foremost experts on megaprojects. With decades of research and landmark books such as Industrial Megaprojects, Leading Complex Projects, and Contract Strategies for Major Projects, Ed has dedicated his career to understanding what truly drives capital project success or failure. It's a privilege to have him here to celebrate this moment with us. Ed, thank you so much for joining. We're honored to have you here on the show for episode 200.
I'm very pleased to join you, Andre.
Thank you. Ed, you've become one of the world's leading authorities on capital projects and mega projects, but I'd like to start with the beginning. What first sparked your interest in studying capital projects, and what was it about these types of projects that capture your attention so deeply?
Well, it started a long time ago. I was a professor at the University of California when an executive at the Rand Corporation, a U.S. think tank, invited me to come down and consult with them on a study that they were wanting to do on the effectiveness of government-funded demonstrations of new technology. And it is really in that study that I got the projects bug. And I think that any project professional around the world will say, we're in projects because we love projects, not because it makes us the CEO, not because it makes us rich, it's because we love projects. So once you catch that projects virus, you are hooked for life.
Yeah, that's true. And after so many decades of research, what would you say are the most recurring mistakes that still affect large and mega capital projects worldwide?
I guess the most common and fundamental problem is where owners don't do their job. And owners frequently misunderstand and understate their own importance in terms of generating successful capital projects. If the owner does not make clear and is not clear for themselves what they want, what they need, and provide their people to articulate the business case, then the project will tend to wander, and the wandering can be very, very expensive. So really, the beginning of a good project is a good, strong business rationale for the project. Without it, nothing works.
Right. And IPA has played a pivotal role in educating owners and their project organizations for the importance of the front-end loading process, right? The FEL for project success.
Exactly.
From
right.
your perspective, is the industry understanding and applying more the FEL over the years?
Well, it's almost shocking to compare the industry's understanding today with when I started about 40 years ago. Because at that point, the whole notion of front-end loading, the whole notion of owners need to do a lot of the upfront work was pretty much unknown. And the term front-end loading hadn't even been invented when we started. So yes, the industry has come a long way. And unlike times past, it isn't really, ignorance is not our biggest problem, not anymore. Our problem is that knowing what to do doesn't make it easy to do it, but at least it makes it feasible, right?
Right. And yet, despite all the data and the research and lessons learned, we still see many organizations skipping or rushing the front end phases. In your opinion, what are the main reasons behind this kind of resistance and what can be done to overcome it?
One of the things that is very difficult, especially for large and complex projects, those projects require the cooperation of a huge number of people and organizations. So within the owner alone, basically the whole owner company is involved in one way or another in making a large project successful. Think about it. I've got operations and maintenance. I've got procurement. I have legal and, the finance folks. I mean, all of these functions have to cooperate, and often cooperation is in short supply.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has their own views of things. Every function has their own internal requirements that they're pursuing, and it's often very difficult to generate deep cooperation. And of course, at the lead should be the corporation, should be corporate itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the C-suite, as it's called, needs to play a significant role in making large projects successful.
And do you think there is an adequate level of understanding of the C-suite in terms of the risks that are inside those projects and the consequences of fast-tracking projects? Are they educated enough to understand it when they approve for the next stage?
Very frequently not. Okay, it's very common that corporate doesn't even really understand what its role is in making a successful project.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, the key role for corporate is effective governance. Think about it this way. Many companies have very clear rules that a project is supposed to be very well prepared before it's sanctioned, before authorization. And yet, many of those very same companies don't actually prepare the projects well before authorization. Now, whose fault is that? It's corporate's fault. Okay? It's no one else's fault. It's corporate's fault. The business sponsor is interested in getting the capital to expand their empire. Mm-hmm. That's what business sponsors do. The people who directly benefit from more effective use of capital is corporate, because they are the shepherds of the shareholders' money, and they're the ones who have to allocate capital correctly. So it falls to corporate to actually govern the process. If they don't want to do it, it doesn't happen. Plain and simple.
And we see that so many times that the project sponsors, as you said, they should be the ones providing enough resources and time for project teams, right? We see so many times they acting more like clients, demanding faster schedules and wanting to move on into execution as soon as possible, and then will hurt the business afterwards, right?
That's correct. Oftentimes, the sponsors don't understand that they have a critical support role to play, and that when the project director, project manager needs cooperation from operations, for example, that sponsor has got to make that happen. The operations people don't belong to the project manager, but the sponsor, the business, has some degree of control over all those functions. That means they have to play their role.
Yeah.
But first role for the sponsor is the sponsor needs to know what he or she wants.
Yeah.
That's job one.
And when they have their goals, their personal goals set more in terms of the milestone that they have to reach instead of the outcomes of the project. What I mean, I've seen so many times the sponsor have their goals for December, for example, to approve the FEL3 of a project, regardless of the level of maturity that the project carries.
Whether it's ready or not.
Yes.
Right. Now, frequently the businesses find themselves schedule driven, and they of course are always frustrated that things can't happen faster. What's interesting, at least to me, is that the speed of the front end depends almost entirely on the quality of the business case. So if a sponsor wants a quick front end, a quick and effective front end to a project, be clear with the business objectives. But then remember, the execution of the project depends on third parties. It depends on contractors. It's not something where we can say, I want it faster, and the engineer is able to design it quicker, and the constructor is able to get all of the equipment faster and actually build it faster. No, they have to build it on a realistic timeline. So frequently what we're doing is we're really pushing on the end of a string, and it just doesn't work. Smaller, simpler projects can be frequently done faster, and they can be done faster with a small amount of money. Large, complex projects can't be done faster. So no matter what you do, you can't make them go quickly. And that's simply because there are too many things that have to be done in parallel. And if any one of those is late, it starts pushing everything to the right. So that's simply a fact of life. It's very important that business sponsors understand that.
And surprisingly, we still see so many large projects and mega projects that are schedule driven, right? Once the sponsor should be focusing on be cost effective, and they're trying to push for speed in large projects, as you said, is impossible.
You know, Andre, I did a study recently where I looked at the extent to which projects can be accelerated. And what we found is that at about $400 million US dollars, the projects, you can spend lots of money trying to accelerate them, and you get no better speed.
Wow.
None. All you do is spend money. And that's because there are too many items on or close to the critical path. And the consequence of that is, yes, I can expedite lots and lots of things, and lots of things arrive early, but not everything. And unfortunately, everything has got to be accelerated at any one node to get any success at all in terms of acceleration. So, yes, we put a lot of effort in, we just don't get a very good result.
In a recent paper, IPA also stated that engineering times are longer now, and the supply chain is still with problems since the pandemic, and you don't see this problem going away in the next years. The companies will not invest enough to have more capacity in terms of supply in the next years, right?
Well, we have a number of problems right now. One is that the big global international EPCs have a demographic problem. A lot of their experienced people have retired, and they're finding it difficult to get their work done. This is particularly a problem on the engineering intensive projects, so things like process plants and so forth. The second problem is that supply chains they have not really fully rebounded after COVID, but COVID is no longer the problem. The problem for most supply chains is China. And it's China for a very particular reason, the one-child policy. In China, they enacted the one-child policy in 1980. In 1979, the average Chinese family had 5.5 children. In 1981, it had one child. Okay, so quite a dramatic change. That policy was not ended until 2018, so just a few years ago. Yeah. And so what we have is an entire generation and a half, 2 generations, really, with many, many fewer people. That means that engineers are in short supply. The people who actually build equipment are in short supply in China. The shipyards are in short supply for people. And the supply chains have not really been able to rebound. The fact that COVID happened, these problems would have occurred even if we never had the pandemic. It's just that COVID made us think that COVID was the problem because COVID did disrupt supply chains. But these supply chains are not coming back to normal. And then, of course, we have the American president doing crazy things, quite frankly, disrupting supply chains further with tariff policies. So we're in a interesting time in terms of being able to get our equipment and materials in a timely way.
And also, I'd like to come back to that point of the tighter schedules and the schedule-driven projects, because you have a kind of a shocking finding in the Contract Strategies book that you show that in cost-driven projects, schedule incentives are more common than in schedule-driven projects. So, as you said in the beginning, how is this business case? How this thing... They don't talk to each other, right?
Yes, I mean, it's fascinating, some of the things that we do. First, let me just say, as a matter of background, supplemental incentives don't very often actually work the way we think they do as owners. So that's the first problem. But we frequently will incentivize cost on a schedule-driven project or incentivize schedule on a cost-driven project. And of course, the two things then directly conflict. I mean, for example, we very frequently incentivize schedule on EPC lump sum projects. Why do we do that? Those projects are perfectly cost incentivized. And no schedule incentive is going to make the contractor say, oh, I'm going to forget about cost and focus on schedule. Not very likely, because every bit of cost comes out of his pocket. So why should he do that? And of course, if you as the owner have a nice, generous schedule, the contractor will take the float out of that schedule in order to win the incentive. Okay? But they didn't really do anything they wouldn't have done otherwise. Because remember, the contractor on an EPC lump sum always wants to float the schedule to the lowest cost.
Yeah.
Of course. But yes, we as owners often think that the things that we do around incentives have magical properties. They don't.
Yeah, that's not good news for most of us.
But on the other hand, it would simplify our life if we would stop trying to use incentives that just don't work. I mean, one of the things that we did, we asked the big international contractors, what do you think of incentives? Well, what they said was, well, we like incentives. And one of them said, and we especially like incentives that pay early and pay often. Fair enough. Now, a second question. What do you do in response to incentives? Oh, nothing. Why? I mean, one contractor really put it in a very articulate way. He said, look, we've been in business for a long time. We do projects in the best way that we know how. Do you honestly think that we could change how we do projects for an incentive? Of course not. In other words, what do you think of safety incentives? Oh, you mean incentives to underreport?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and one contractor said around safety incentives, he said, we do pay insurance. Okay, you know that we pay insurance, and you know that our insurance premiums go straight up if we have unsafe practices. So now, do you really think that if we're a safe contractor, we won't bring good safety practices to your project because you didn't give us an incentive? You must think we're stupid. Of course we'll bring the best safety program that we understand how to do. And imagine we don't have a safety culture. We don't have good safety practices. Do you think we're going to learn it in the next 6 weeks before your construction starts? Not very likely. Okay, so when you actually think about incentives in sort of common sense ways, then you begin to understand why they actually don't work the way we would like them to.
It's easier to have the illusion that the contract will change reality, right?
Exactly right. Yes. And
As you stated in the book.
The contractor will, if given the question and able to answer honestly, will say, no, we can't actually do that.
And we often see, again, your research on the contract strategies, we often see teams choosing contracting strategies that aim to shift more risk into the contractors. But ironically, the very reasons that are behind this decision, usually when you have a lean owner team, unrealistic planning, high uncertainty, those are the opportunities that some companies identify to try to shift the risk to contractor. And those are exactly the ones that should discourage such an approach, right?
That's
How
right.
do you see this contradiction, and why do you think this persists in so many projects?
Look, first, I understand why an owner wants to shift risk to the contractor. What I don't understand is why an owner would believe that I can shift risk to a contractor and it won't cost me anything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a curious whole notion. I mean, that's the notion that, I can get a very good insurance policy and I won't have to pay for it. Not very likely in the real world, is it? And if the project is not well thought through, if the project has not been properly front-end loaded, risk transfer is impossible. It all comes back. And generally, when it comes back with interest. So it isn't even that it just comes back to me, I pay early and I pay later. So, yes, be very careful that you don't simply try to push risk off and imagine that that will give you better results. I often have folks who believe that an EPC lump sum is a ceiling on project cost.
Yes.
And I say, no, that's the floor, not the ceiling. Okay. I guarantee you it will not cost any less than the EPC lump sum amount, but it certainly can cost more.
Much more, as you show in the research sometimes, right?
Unfortunately.
And do you see we have space to move more into a collaborative approach in contracting, like integrated project delivery? I've seen the research and the outcomes are not good. Do you think that how can we move this equation to be better? We try to pressure the contractors to a lower price, tighter schedules, shifting so many risks to them. And at the end, we have low quality, low safety standards. We have claims and disputes and so on. Do you think we have space to redesign the way contractings are done in large projects?
I think it's important to understand that collaboration does not depend on contracting type. And I have seen EPC lump sum projects where the owner team and the contractor team are seamlessly together. Mm-hmm. They work together. You come into a meeting, you don't know who's a contractor and who's an owner. I've seen IPD teams where they are every element of the team is at war with every other element. Collaboration depends on respect and depends on treating people not only with respect, but as professionals. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, when you listen, it's remarkable how the team chemistry is good. And when you don't, nothing helps it. In general, IPD, integrated project delivery, is a strategy that I think works better for small projects than larger projects. Large projects are progressively, as they get more complex, they are opaque to the owner. The owner cannot actually see into the project because the project is so complex. Smaller projects are where I think that basically any form of contracting works better, and mm-hmm. IPD works fine. In a large complex project, you want a simple contracting strategy, one that makes it very, very clear who owns what risk. And let me just say, there is no such thing as a shared risk. A shared risk is your risk. It isn't mine. Okay?
Yeah.
So don't talk to me about shared risk. And you see, IPD is all about shared risk. And I need risk assignment. I need absolute, as much clarity as we can get around who owns what risk. And I want the risk assignment to be rational, which is I don't want to assign a risk to a contractor that the contractor can't manage. Why would I want to do that? All that does is create an unmanaged risk. It doesn't solve any problems. The risk is still unmanaged. So what I really want to do is to have everybody take on the risks that they can manage and know that that's what they're doing. So, for example, I tell owners, you should never take field productivity risk. Why? You can't manage it. You don't have the people, you don't have the systems, you can't possibly manage that risk. The contractor, the constructors actually control that risk. They can manage it, they should take it. Okay? On the other hand, all aspects of your business case belong to you, not to the contractor. So don't be imagining that you can shift that risk, because you can't. And remember, contractors are not well-capitalized companies. They're variable cost companies. And what that means is they cannot easily carry large equity type risk. And if they do have to carry such risk, they're going to charge you for it. And not a little bit. They're going to charge you handsomely for it. And they should, by the way.
Yeah.
In other words, that's rational economic behavior.
There's stakes on the line, right?
Exactly. As I sometimes say, with large projects, the EPC lump sum contractor is playing Russian roulette with every project.
Mm-hmm.
That's a game that you always want to play carefully.
Yes. I had two experiences that are typical of this situation. We had some risks as owners, some geotechnical risks, lack of site investigation, and our CEO wanted to do a lump sum contract. We couldn't remove this idea from his head. And then we went to the market in the first time seeking for a unit price contract. And then he demanded a change for lump sum. We stated all the risks, showed the contractors that we didn't have all the data. And then the price went up, of course, a lot. And they didn't want to sign the contract, the contractors, because they were taking risks that were not related to the service itself. So, but we had no choice. And then we executed both projects. It went well. They didn't have to spend more money on the field issues and so on. So they saved a lot of money. And then I tried to explain for almost 2 years to the CEO that it only worked because they didn't have to spend their contingency, because it was pure profit for them. You have the illusion to be covered by the contract, but if they have issues with that, they start losing money, they can prove that the problem is the scope, that the problem is the site that we didn't investigate properly.
And it all comes back to the owner.
With interests, as you said.
Yes.
You updated your research on mega projects, right? I'm reading again the second edition. What can you tell us about the findings with the first research in 2011 to now? Are we evolving? Are the outcomes better? Are we still suffering with the same problems? What we can tell us in a nutshell about this update on this research?
Well, there's good news and there's bad news. First, the good news. The percentage of successful projects increased from the first 5 years of this century to the last 5 years. So, in fact, we got better performance as we've gone through over the last 25 years or so. The performance is not great, but it's improved. And one of the reasons it's improved is because we've improved our controls. So that's made a significant difference. We've done better in production attainment. So that's a big improvement.
Mm-hmm.
The bad news is that over the last 3 years or so, the quality of our front-end work is declining.
Wow.
That's not good. Okay, so after it had improved, it started to then go back. And that's frustrating because that means that the projects that finish up next year, the year thereafter, are likely to be less successful rather than more. The other thing that happened that I don't like is we, as an industry, well, let me back up a little bit.
Mhm.
Everybody knows that there are two ways to prevent a cost overrun. The right way is to do really, really good work on the front end so that the amount of money that you need to spend is the amount of money in the estimate. The other way is to stuff lots and lots and lots of extra money in the estimate. So I had a set of projects over the last 10-year period where I had many more that had very fat estimates. And those were all projects that would have made a lot of money if they had not been overestimated and overspent. Okay, so some of them underran while costing 30% more than industry average.
Wow.
Yeah,
In a mega project, that's a lot of money.
that's a lot of money. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
So, yes, it does that. I didn't like to see that tendency to try to cover our problems by overestimating.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in general, I do think that the big complex projects are better today than they were in the year 2000. We have a ways to go yet, so let's keep at it.
Yeah, as you said, with the maturity level coming down in the last years, this is nothing we expect as the industry. As you said, we now have more access to this knowledge, to the processes, to the lessons learned from past projects. So we know the path that we need to follow, right? And
yes, we do.
Still, it's difficult to get the company to follow that way.
It's just very important that we field good owner teams.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's really critical. I mean, well, IPA has always been called the FEL company, the front end loading company. But if you had to ask me, what's the single most important thing on a capital project? I'd say the owner team. Not the FEL, the owner team. The owner team can do good FEL. The poor owner team, the owner team that's missing people, can't do it. No matter how hard they try, they just can't do it. So field those teams.
And there's another paper from IPA from last year, I believe, that you researched asking companies if they were comfortable with their teams, and most of them said that the team is too lean for the portfolio. And then the next question was, is your portfolio going to increase in the next years? And the answer was yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the third question was, okay, we will staff the team, we will hire more people. And the answer was no. How do you see that? Because we're seeing the trend here, right? You said in the last 3 years, we've seen the maturity level going down. We have all the problems with the project organization, the engineering organizations also. And we see this lack of experience in so many owner organizations. And now they expect to have larger projects. They expect to have larger portfolios, and they don't.
And new technology projects as well. So for decarbonization, for example, those projects frequently have new technology in them. So yet more problems. And you're exactly right, Andre, that we're on a collision course with history here. If we do not staff these teams, we will not be able to do these projects, plain and simple. We will find that they get away from us, that they not only fail, but fail miserably.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, we need to train people as well. In other words, part of the problem here is that project teams are managing to do what I only dream of doing. They're getting younger every year. And, they're not very experienced. So the average project team has lost about 3 years of age on average over the last decade. That's actually a lot, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're seeing is more inexperienced teams. When we ask owners, well, are you pumping up your training? No. So yes, we're not entirely rational about what we're doing here.
And as you mentioned, we have a huge wave of new projects coming right now, right? In the decarbonization, we hear a lot of people talking about hydrogen, carbon capture, and so on. Companies are not used to this kind of projects. It's kind of new worldwide. So, what do you think about this new horizon of environmental friendly projects and the way the companies are used to develop the projects right now?
Well, I think that because the projects are new to the companies, it does make them much more difficult. These renewables projects, these decarbonization projects, CCS and so forth, are projects that are very difficult to shape. They're projects that are very difficult to put together on the front end and create a situation where you actually have a business rationale for doing the projects.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them don't stand on their own. So, for example, green hydrogen doesn't make sense for an owner without government support. Just can't, okay? So that makes the whole getting the project up and going more difficult. It means that it's much longer on the front end in order to have the time to get all those things arranged. And the effect of it is that a lot of those projects are very, very difficult projects.
Mm-hmm.
So the new technology and many of them also makes things more difficult, because now I have to worry not only about all the usual large project things, I have to worry about the quality of the basic data as well. So I've got all those added technical issues that I've got to worry about. I mean, we had one project recently that got to the middle of detailed engineering. They had started construction when they realized they could not close the heat and material balances on the process.
Wow.
That's what my children would call an OMG moment.
Yes.
And of course, they had to shut the project down, and the project has been shut down for over 2 years now while they build a pilot plant so that they can actually figure out what the heat and material balances should be. Well, that's not supposed to happen. But you see, many of our companies have not done much in the way of new technology for many years.
Mm-hmm.
So they've forgotten. Well, unfortunately, reality has a habit of reminding us in dramatic fashion.
Yeah, very dramatic fashion. And do you see that those projects that are not NPV positive can be like, as you said, you've been studying, should study for years, but then you have like a political move to, okay, let's go. I'll promise to the market that we'll be doing the decarbonization project and we'll zero our emissions in so many years and so on. And then those projects are hibernating until it's too late and you need to fast track to execution, as happens with some regulatory projects.
Yes, it does. And first thing, CEOs need to be very careful about what they promise the market. Talk to a project person and don't leave home without him. Okay? Well, we need to actually know what's doable. Yes, you're right. There are a lot of green projects are political in nature. They are projects that often don't have strong business cases. Sometimes they have no business cases at all. So it's going to be difficult to get them to authorization. And once we get them to authorization, the politicians who are often funding the projects want them yesterday. So that puts a lot of pressure on us to do things faster than we actually can. And given that a lot of these are also new technology projects, we run a lot of risk with these projects. I always encourage my clients, if you're going to do a decarbonization project, do a project that's a renewable or whatever, start small. Okay, start small, learn the supply chain, then talk about scaling up. Don't go with a mega project. I mean, when you start with a mega project, you're probably going to fail. And there's an old expression that I like, which is you're supposed to make your mistakes on a small scale and your money on a large scale. Well, when you start with mega projects, you're threatening to do exactly the opposite. Make your mistakes on a large scale and make your money on a very small scale.
That's true. And talking about scale, we are now so used to mega projects that we are seeing the projects crossing the $10 billion mark, the giga projects. Are these projects different?
Or even 20. Yes. I'm evaluating a project right now, Andre, with a $25 billion overrun.
Overrun. Wow.
Overrun. Yes, they're getting bigger, they're getting harder, and as we go forward in the 21st century, we're going to have a lot more of those projects. So we're going to be finding that we need to protect coastlines, that we need to basically make the tide recede, and it's not that easy to do. So it's going to be very difficult with these projects going forward. So we need to get good at them now because we're going to have to do it later.
I had a very interesting conversation with Joseph Brewer Jr. from the Sadara project. We recorded an episode here.
Yes, my good friend Joseph. Yes.
And he was talking about the challenges, the global supply chain. There was one equipment that the only supply in the world will not be able to provide all the equipment on time. So things that were not seen in the first project that was developed. And then when he took over the project in FEL3, they changed scope, changed location, and developed the plans and so on. I know you helped them at the time. So it was very nice from being outsider, listen to the experience without having to live it.
Yes, and they delivered that project. Joseph did a marvelous job with it. I would also add that Joseph had an owner team on that project of a little over 200. So it's important. I mean, Joseph was not working alone. He had a very strong owner organization working with him, both from Dow and from Aramco.
Yeah. He talked about the 27 project teams that they have for the 27 process units on the plant.
27 projects, yes. All tightly connected.
Yeah. Ed, to wrap up, what advice would you give project teams and leaders who are looking to improve the outcomes of their capital projects, especially in today's increasingly complex environment?
Right now, I would strongly encourage corporate leaders to get engaged with their project organizations. Come to understand what today's projects are actually facing in terms of difficulties, and what's feasible and what is really not feasible in today's environment. And for heaven's sakes, let them staff the projects. Because if we don't staff them, we set them up to fail. So that's first thing we have to do.
You don't look for savings when staffing your project team, right?
That's right. You look for savings in a good project. That's what you do.
Great. Ed, thank you so much for sharing your time and experience with us in this very special episode.
It's great to see you, Andre, and my very best to you.
To our listeners here, thank you for being with us through this journey of 200 episodes. Don't forget to follow the Capital Projects podcast on your favorite platform and share this episode with your peers in engineering, construction, and project management. And I have good news for all of you. PMI, the Project Management Institute, has created the PMO Circle for Giga, Mega, and Capital Projects, a space created for PMO professionals working on some of the world's most ambitious initiatives, from infrastructure and energy to smart cities and national transformation programs. So I invite you to join this community so we can take the discussion further. I'll post a link in the description of this episode, and I hope to see you there. Thank you for being us. I hope to see you in the next episode of the Capital Projects podcast.